Not free in the way the world promises, comfort, acceptance, or moral applause. No, this is a darker kind of freedom. The kind that rips you from the herd, strips away illusions, and forces you to see power not as privilege, but as birthright. Both knew this forbidden truth. The world does not belong to the righteous. It belongs to the ruthless who dare to awaken. This is not for the faint of heart. This is for the giant within you, the one you were taught to silence. They will tell you to be kind. They will beg you to be fair. They will write laws to keep you tame, to keep you hoping, to keep you believing that virtue is rewarded and justice is natural. But here's the thought they fear you will have, the thought they punish, silence, exile. What if the world is not moral? What if the world is simply a battlefield of wills, and the one who sees clearly rules absolutely? This is not cynicism. This is clarity. The weak invent morality to bind the strong. They call mercy a virtue, not because it is noble, but because it protects them from wrath. They teach humility, not because it enlightens, but because it disarms. And they convince you that power is something to be earned through patience, obedience, and approval. No, Nietzsche would call this the morality of slaves. Machiavelli would call it dangerous delusion. Power does not ask for permission. It does not wait for applause. Power is the child of bold perception. The moment you see through the veil, see the world not as it should be but as it is, you awaken something monstrous, something free. You begin to notice how the pious tremble in private, how the loudest moralists hide their envy behind sermons. You begin to sense that behind every law is a threat, and behind every throne is a man who stopped playing by the rules long ago. The herd calls him evil. History calls him king. That is a paradox. The very men who shape the world are the ones the world is taught to despise. And yet we secretly admire them, because deep inside we know the truth. Virtue without strength is ornamental. Strength without guilt is divine. To see the world as it is means to strip away illusions of fairness and to recognize strategy where others see chaos. It means to ask not what is right, but what works, what survives, what wins. That question changes everything. You no longer flinch when called ruthless. You no longer hesitate when opportunity knocks, and someone else must fall for you to rise. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. The man who dares to see clearly is no longer a servant of ideals. He becomes their master. That man is dangerous because he no longer believes the lies that keep society in line. He no longer kneels to gods he does not fear. He no longer apologizes for wanting more. And in that moment, he is reborn, not as a man among equals, but as a force among the blind. The world does not grant you power. It resists you until you take it. They told you to be a good person, to be agreeable, to follow the rules, bow to authority, suppress your instincts, and trust the architect of your cage. They called it virtue. They gave you gold stars for obedience, applause for silence, and a tiny place in the corner of the world where you could wither politely. But here's a heresy they dread you discovering. Obedience was never virtue. It was control dressed in moral clothing. Nietzsche saw it. Machiavelli exploited it. The herd fears chaos more than death, so they sanctify submission. They create ideals like goodness, humility, and selflessness, not because these things are powerful, but because they make people predictable. And predictable people are easy to rule. Obedience is not the sign of a noble soul. It is the mark of a domesticated animal, one trained to feel guilt for wanting more, to feel shame for questioning lies, to feel fear at the sound of its own primal voice. Ask yourself, who benefits from your obedience? Who grows fat while you shrink in name of duty? The virtuous man, they say, turns the other cheek. He forgives all, serves all, sacrifices all. But what happens when that man is surrounded by wolves? He is devoured and praised for it. They write songs about his kindness, while the wolves eat in silence. That is a sickness of modern morality. It rewards you after you're destroyed, not while you're alive. Obedience is the slow suicide of self. A child is taught to sit still in class, to raise his hand for permission to speak, to memorize truths that cannot be questioned. And when that child becomes an adult, he is applauded for repeating the slogans of his time, for voting the way he was told, for dying quietly with a smile. But somewhere deep beneath the layers of training, something remains. A spark, a growl, a memory of what it felt like to be untamed. That is where rebellion begins, not with a shout, but with a whisper. What if they lied to me? Machiavelli would laugh at the idea that obedience is virtue. To him, a ruler must be willing to lie, to manipulate, to appear virtuous while doing what is necessary. He knew that those who rise to power do not follow the rules. They write them. Nietzsche would go further. He would say the very concept of morality is a tool created by the weak to shackle the strong. They cannot stop you physically, so they poison your conscience. They teach you to feel bad for wanting power, for speaking truth, for refusing to kneel. But the moment you stop apologizing for your hunger, for your insight, for your strength, the world shifts. You are no longer a servant of someone else's idea of virtue. You become something dangerous, something alive. Obedience may get you praise, but only rebellion will give you your soul back. They don't teach you to rise. They teach you to wait your turn, wait for approval, wait for the world to recognize your value. But here's the brutal truth. The world does not reward the worthy. It rewards the daring. The thrones of history were not given to those who begged politely for crown. They were taken by those who decided to wear it, whether the world liked it or not. From the very beginning, you are conditioned to wait. Wait until you're older. Wait until you're qualified. Wait until you're chosen. But what they don't tell you is that the choosing never comes. The gatekeepers will always find reason to ignore you because they fear what happens when someone no longer asks for permission. The man who rises without approval exposes the entire system as a lie. That's why they mock the ambitious, shame the bold, and crucify the ones who move too fast. But the greatest offense is not arrogance. It is independence. Machiavelli knew this well. He wrote not for the moral, but for the strategic. The prince who seizes power without waiting earns the loyalty of those who admire strength, and the fear of those who must obey. He does not ask to be liked. He asks to win. And Nietzsche would strip it down to its bones. The individual who waits for permission to become himself is already dead. The herd does not crown the individual who thinks differently. It devours him. That's why the one who rises must first kill the part of himself that seeks to be accepted. Look around. The statues are built for those who acted. The ones who waited are buried in silence. Waiting is comfortable. Yes, it feels safe. It sedates the fear of failure. But it is a beautiful cage. And the longer you stay inside it, the more you forget that the door was never locked. You don't need permission to speak. You don't need permission to lead. You don't need permission to evolve into something unrecognizable to the people who once knew you. You only need the audacity to rise. But here's the cost. The moment you stop waiting, you become a threat to your family, to your friends, to your culture, because your courage will expose their cowardice. Your ascent will shine a cruel light on their stagnation. And some will try to pull you back, not out of malice, but out of fear. You will remind them of what they could have been. You will show them the price of their obedience. And that is a burden the weak will never forgive. So the question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you are willing to be misunderstood, willing to be envied, willing to be alone at the top. Because a man who never asks for permission to rise, he may be hated, but he will never be forgotten. There is a power greater than strength, greater than beauty, greater even than love. It is the power to make men pause when you enter the room, not because they despise you, but because they do not dare to cross you. And yet, they cannot name why. That is fear. Not the crude, violent fear-born tyrants, but the refined, strategic fear of a man who knows exactly what he is capable of and has chosen restraint. Machiavelli whispered this truth centuries ago. It is safer to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. But he said more. He warned that hatred is dangerous, unpredictable, a poison that can rot a ruler from within. The goal is not terror. It is control. The great leader, the awakened one, knows how to inspire dread without invoking rage. How? Through mystery, through mastery, through measured silence that says more than 1,000 declarations of strength. Nietzsche saw this as a mark of the Übermensch. Not the brute who conquers by force, but the man who has mastered himself so fully that others instinctively yield. He does not need to shout. He does not need to threaten. His presence is enough. The man who cannot be manipulated, cannot be provoked, cannot be shamed. This man becomes a mirror to the weakness of others. And that reflection is what makes them fear him, not his actions, his restraint. You must understand, fear is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is a recognition of limits, of where one man ends and another begins. And the man who knows his own limits, who has stared into the abyss of his own darkness and chosen not to unleash it carelessly, becomes untouchable. That is the paradox. The most dangerous man is the one who never needs to prove it. But this is an art, not a science. If you become too harsh, they will turn on you. Too soft, and they will walk over you. You must walk that razor's edge. You must smile with cold eyes. You must grant mercy, but never out of weakness. You must reward loyalty, but never become dependent. Let them admire your strength. Let them fear your silence. Let them wonder what you are thinking. Even when you say nothing at all, power cloaked in composure is the most intoxicating force in the world. To be feared without being hated is to move like a shadow, felt but never grasped. You leave no stains of cruelty, yet no doubts about your limits. You do not beg to be liked. You do not cower before slander. And because of that, you become legend. Not the kind they write songs about, but the kind whispered about behind closed doors. The kind others try to emulate but cannot understand. Because what they don't realize is this. True fear does not come from violence. It comes from the disciplined man who chooses peace and could destroy everything if he ever chose otherwise. Words are spells, not in the poetic sense, but in the brutal, psychological sense. The most powerful prisons were never made of iron or stone. They were made of syllables, of slogans, of sacred words repeated until men forgot they had edges, forgot they had teeth, forgot they had the right to question. Duty, decency, democracy, these are not truths. These are cages, and the more you repeat them without thought, the tighter they close around your throat. Nietzsche understood this poison better than anyone. He called it the tyranny of language, the great deception that convinces men they are free while binding them to invisible laws. The herd does not need chains when it has definitions. Call disobedience selfish, and men will punish themselves. Call ambition greed, and they will shrink back into mediocrity. Call violence evil, and even self-defense will feel like sin. And so, through language, power maintains its throne without ever lifting a sword. Machiavelli knew it too. He advised princes not just to wield force, but to manipulate appearances, to speak of virtue while doing what was necessary. Because people do not want truth. They want stories. And those stories are built with words, crafted not to awaken but to sedate, to make men feel noble while they remain weak. That is the brilliance of the cage. The prisoner not only accepts it, he defends it. What they never tell you is that every civilization is built on agreed-upon fictions. And the moment you question those fictions, you become dangerous. Question duty, and you are labeled disloyal. Question decency, and you are called depraved. Question democracy, and you are cast as a threat to order. But the real threat was always the unquestioned word, the sacred lie repeated until it ossified into morality. That is a trap. When a word becomes holy, thinking stops. But the awakened man learns to see through the mask. He does not worship the word. He interrogates it. He cuts it open to see what bleeds. Is duty just another word for obedience to the powerful? Is decency merely fear dressed up as virtue? Is democracy still freedom when it is driven by ignorance and sold to the highest bidder? The moment you begin to ask these questions, you are no longer asleep, and that, more than anything, terrifies the architects of the cage, because the man who sees through language cannot be ruled. He will not flinch when called names. He will not kneel to slogans. He understands that power does not live in words. It lives in actions, in choices. In the raw will become more than what society tells him is acceptable. He rewrites the dictionary of his life, not with ink, but with fire. He replaces should with must, can't with will, sin with so what. And in doing so, he becomes something the world cannot categorize, cannot tame. Not because he broke the cage, but because he remembered it was never real to begin with. The world worships noise. It confuses volume with authority, reaction with power, constant speaking with leadership. But the truly dangerous man, the one who shifts empires and rewrites destiny, rarely speaks. He listens, he watches, he waits, because he understands that silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. It is a space where calculation sharpens, where perception deepens, where the real game is played. Machiavelli knew the value of stillness. The prince who speaks too often reveals his hand. The ruler who reacts too quickly shows his fear. But the one who remains silent while others expose their motives becomes a mirror. In him, others see their own reflection, and mistake it for understanding. He becomes impenetrable. His silence is not a void. It is a weapon, waiting to be drawn at the precise moment when the enemy thinks he's won. Nietzsche would tell you silence is the domain of the sovereign individual, the man who no longer needs to explain himself, because to explain is to seek permission. To justify is to bend the knee. But the silent man has transcended the need for validation. He is not interested in being understood. He is interested in being undeniable. In silence, 1,000 thoughts converge. The fool fills the air with opinions, terrified of being forgotten. But the master conserves his words like currency, spending only what earns power. Every moment of stillness stores energy, gathers intelligence, prepares a strike. This is a prelude, not to retreat, but to domination. When he finally speaks, it is not to be heard. It is to be obeyed. This is why the silent man is feared. Not because he is loud, but because no one knows what he's thinking. He doesn't argue. He doesn't defend. He simply watches, while others unravel. They fill the silence with projections, doubts, insecurities. They guess. They panic. They reveal everything. Meanwhile, he says nothing and sees everything. And when the time comes, he moves with precision. No wasted energy. No apology. No hesitation. He doesn't ask for acceptance. He takes what is his, because silence had prepared him, not just outwardly, but internally. In the stillness, he has killed every part of himself that once begged to be liked. In the silence, he has become immune to insult, unmoved by praise. And now he is untouchable. To the world, he appears calm. But beneath the surface, storms are brewing. Calculations are complete. Weakness has been studied. Allies have been tested. Enemies have been measured. The moment of action will be surgical, absolute. And no one will see it coming, because everyone mistook his silence for surrender. But they were wrong. Silence was the smoke before the fire, the breath before the blade, the final calm before history shifted in his favor. From the moment you are born, you are taught to bow. Bow to systems, to symbols, to invisible judges watching your every move. You're handed a script, told who you are, what to believe, what to fear. You are promised order, meaning salvation, but only if you stay small, only if you kneel, only if you never question who built the throne, or why it remains untouched by the chaos it demands you endure. But here's the forbidden realization, the one buried beneath centuries of obedience and noise. There is no one sitting at the top. The throne is empty. The authority you fear, is inherited illusion. The rules you follow were not handed down by some higher wisdom. They were written by people no greater than you, repeated until they calcified into law. And the moment you realize this, something inside you dies, and something far more dangerous begins to stir. Nietzsche called this the death of false idols, the collapse of the great lie that meaning comes from outside, that someone else knows better, that your suffering has a pre-approved explanation if you just wait long enough. No, meaning is not handed down. It is carved from the chaos by those with the will to rise. Machiavelli understood this truth in politics. Authority is not inherited. It is claimed. And the masses do not follow because they believe. They follow because they fear, because they need the illusion of a throne, even when it is hollow, because it comforts them to think someone else is steering the ship, even if that someone is long gone. But the one who awakens knows the world is not being steered. It is drifting. And if you do not take the helm, you are merely cargo on someone else's voyage. This realization does not bring comfort. It brings fire. You are no longer allowed the luxury of victimhood. You can no longer blame systems, leaders, fate. The absence of a ruler means the burden is now yours. The power, the responsibility, the terror, all of it. That's what awakening truly is. Not enlightenment, but confrontation. You look around, expecting to find the one in charge, and instead you find a mirror. And that's the moment the game changes. You stop waiting. You stop seeking. You start building, not in defiance, but in full understanding that no one is coming to lead you. No one is coming to fix it. No one is coming to save you. The throne is there, but it's cold, dusty, and vacant. You either take it or live under the shadow of those who do. Most people will look away. They will call it blasphemy, nihilism, madness. But it is none of those things. It is clarity. It is the raw and burning knowledge that the only authority that matters is the one you claim. And from that moment forward, you are no longer a citizen of someone else's kingdom. You become the architect of your own dominion. So now you know, the forbidden thought is not some arcane secret locked away in ancient texts. It is a simple, searing realization that no one is coming. That the world is not governed by divine justice or inherited morality, but by will clarity and the courage to act when others tremble. Nietzsche tried to warn you. The chains around your soul are made of ideas you never questioned. Machiavelli showed you. Power is not earned through purity. It is seized through perception and precision. The cage was never locked. The throne was never occupied. The rules were never sacred. And the moment you stop asking for permission, stop apologizing for your strength, stop waiting for the world to crown you, you awaken the giant, the one who sees clearly, moves decisively, speaks rarely, and never kneels, because the greatest rebellion is not to fight the system. It is to no longer need it.